Hi everyone! Welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. Today we're going to be making a pretty fully reusable gift bag very much inspired by the Romanticism of the Victorian era. We're going to be using Mani-Pedi by Lion Brand for today's project. And we'd like to thank Lion Brand Yarns for sponsoring today's video. Mani-Pedi is a super fine size 1 weight yarn. It's a wool blend and it comes in lots of pretty self-striping colors. That makes it perfect for a project like this. The super fine weight yarn makes any stitch look delicate and fancy, even if it's not difficult to do. The wool gives it strength, so your little reusable bag can be used over and over and over again, and it'll maintain its shape and its pretty little colors. And the self-striping yarn makes your project interesting without you having to worry about changing colors. If you want to check out all the pretty colorways that Mani-Pedi comes in, you can check out lionbrand.com. And we've got a link to their website in the description box down below. The Victorians believed that the gift should be part of the giver. So gifts and gift wrapping were very often handmade, which made them very popular and highly coveted. They also loved details, and our little bag is not short on those. We're using two pretty simple little repeating patterns, one for the main build and one for the edging. And even our little gift bag drawstrings have cute little hearts attached to both ends. That makes them pretty, cute, perfect for your sweetheart, and they're not going to come out of your bag once they're put in. If you'd like to hear more about the gift-giving practices of the Victorians, stay tuned to the end of the video. We've got a mini history lesson for you. So let's grab our hooks, grab our yarn, we'll head on over to the craft table, and we will stitch up the sweetest little fully reusable gift bag together. In order to make our reusable gift bags, we're using Mani-Pedi by Lion Brand. You only need one ball for this project. Each ball is 50 grams or 219 yards. It's a wool blend, so it's 75% wool. It's a super fine weight or a size 1 weight yarn. And this particular colorway is called Mittens. You're also going to want a pair of scissors, a yarn needle. You might want a stitch marker or a safety pin just so you can keep track of the first stitch of each row. And we're using a 3.25 millimeter hook today. This is also known as a D or a 3 in the US, a size 10 in the UK. And if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, take a moment to click that button and the bell so you never miss another episode. And once you've got all this together, we can get started. We're going to begin with a slip knot. So we're going to start at the bottom of the bag and work our way up. We're going to chain 30 to begin. Once you have 30 chains, it won't be very long. You can sort of spread them out and hold them between your two fingers. So it's not a very long chain, but this is going to be the bottom of the bag. So the bag is going to be just a little bit wider than this foundation chain. You're going to skip the first chain from the hook, find the second one, and you're going to work 3 half double crochets into it. So skip the first chain, find the second one, and work 3 half double crochets into it. When you're working small, you might want to move a little slower than you are used to until you get comfortable working with the smaller hook and the smaller stitches. So 3 half double crochet worked into the second chain from the hook. You're going to work a half double crochet now into each of the next 27 chains. So 1 half double crochet into each of the next 27 chains. That will leave you with 1 chain left at the end of the row. And I'll catch up with you there. Once you've half double crocheted into the next 27 chains, that will leave you with 1 chain. So 1 chain left. Don't mistake your little knot on the end for a chain. That isn't a chain. You're going to ignore that because it's a knot. You're going to work 3 half double crochet into the last chain. And then you're going to turn your work so that you're going to half double crochet into the 27 undersides of those stitches that are all in a row. So you're done with this end chain and you're not going to put anything into that end chain, and you can see the nice big space there. You're only going to work a half double crochet into the underside of each of those 27 stitches from the other side of your foundation row. So you can work over top of your short tail if you want to, or leave it out and weave it in later. There's where we just finished, so that space there is where we finished working our 3 half double crochets. So the next space you're looking for is this one right here. And you're just going to half double crochet all the way back. You should have 27 half double crochets to work, and then we'll slip stitch to join when we get back to the beginning. Once you've worked a half double crochet into each of those 27 stitches all the way back, there's your last half double crochet. There's the last chain, or the first one, but there's your 3 half double crochets that we started with worked into it. You're going to find the top of your first half double crochet and join with a slip stitch. You'll have 60 stitches in total, and something that looks like this. So a little sort of flat bottom for your bag. It's rounded on both ends. And that's it for the base of the bag. We're going to jump right into the little shell stitch now. And this is where you might want to use your stitch marker if you feel you need to. We're going to chain 3 to begin, and the chain 3 at the beginning of each row will count as a double crochet into the same stitch that you joined in. So you see that if you pull up, you see that little space, you're going to work 2 more double crochet into that same stitch. And there's your first little shell made. So a shell is 3 double crochet, and the chain 3 at the beginning of every row will count as a double crochet. So there's your first shell. You're going to skip 2 stitches. And like I said, if you feel you need to mark this with a stitch marker, just so you know where you are, you can just mark the whole thing because a shell is 1 motif. So if you feel you need to, go ahead. Otherwise, you can just sort of eyeball it when you get back around to it. Skip 2 stitches, find the next one, and work a shell into it. So 1, 2, skip, and then 3 double crochet into the third stitch. So skip 2, 3 double crochet into the next stitch. Skip 2 stitches, 3 double crochet into the next stitch. And that's all you're going to do all the way around. So 3 double crochet or 1 shell, skip 2 stitches, 3 double crochet or a shell into the next stitch. I'll see you on the other side. Once you've worked that little shell stitch all the way around, you will have 20 shell motifs or 60 double crochet, but it's very easy to count your little shells. So just count the shells. You should have 20 of them, and you'll have 20 in every row going forward. So every row goes all the way around the bag once, and every row has 20 little shells in it. When you get to the end of the row, it should look something like this. So you've got 2 stitches left to skip. This little guy here is what we call the false stitch. He sits right at the bottom of those chain 3 that began the row. That's why I say you might want to mark your first shell with a little stitch marker, because sometimes when you get back around to the beginning, you might kind of lose track of where you are. It maybe looks the same if you're working flat. So just marking that first little motif every row, just move your stitch marker with each row, will help remind you when you get back around to it that it's time to stop so you can start another row. So once you've worked your 20th motif, you skip those remaining stitches, you find the top of that chain 3 that you began the whole row with and join with a slip stitch. Now your little bag will start to turn into a bit of a boat shape because we've established that first row. So it's going to want to do this. It's going to look like a little canoe. Now if it's not turning up on you, don't worry. It just might be that you've got nice loose tension, and so it might just lay flat on you, but every row will have 20 motifs in it. So from here on out, your bag will start to kind of turn into a bit of a bowl or a boat shape. So if it hasn't done it right away, don't worry too much about it. At the end of every row, we join with a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3 that began it. And then to start the next row, you want to begin in the middle of a motif. So if I'm just going to sort of separate this, you can see that 3 double crochet motif. There's nice big spaces on either side of it. We've joined at the top of the chain 3. You're going to slip stitch into the top of that middle stitch that's the middle of the motif. So just slip stitch. So slip stitch to join in the top of the chain 3, and then slip stitch immediately into the stitch next to that. So you're sitting in the middle of the motif. And here's where we begin every row. Chain 3 from the middle of the motif. That chain 3 counts as a double crochet. And into the same place that you chained out of, you want to work 2 more double crochets to complete that motif. And there we go. So each shell will sit directly on top of the shell from the previous row. Hop over to the next shell, find the middle stitch, and work 3 double crochet into it. So every shell is worked into the very middle of the shell from the previous row. This way all of our shells will sit in neat alignment, and all of the little spaces in between will be right on top of each other. Skip to the next shell. It's easy, you can kind of pull it apart. Find the middle stitch, work 3 double crochet into the top of it. And you're going to repeat that all the way around. You'll still have 20 shell motifs, and when you get back to the beginning, you're going to join with a slip stitch to the top of that chain 3 that began the row. So 20 motifs. I'll catch up with you at the end of row 3. At the end of every row, make sure you've got 20 motifs. They should all be sitting neatly on top of the ones from the row before. That will bring you up to the edge of the first motif you made. Find the top of that chain 3 and join with a slip stitch to it. So you should definitely have like a little boat shape happening now. 20 motifs in every single row. They all sit on top of each other. Before you begin any row, make sure you've slip stitched into the center stitch of that motif so that you begin in the middle of it. I'm just going to pull at it again so you can see that. So you begin in the middle, chain 3, every row begins with a chain 3, that counts as a double crochet, and then finish that first shell by working 2 more double crochet into the same stitch that you chained out of. And that's your first shell made. If you're using a stitch marker, make sure you move it and you mark the first shell of your next row. We're going to do another 10 rows of our little shell stitch, and at that point you can decide if you want to make it just a little bigger or you want to continue along with me. So this pattern has a little bit of flexibility in as far as how tall you want to make your little sack. But I'm going to have at least 12 rows of this shell stitch in total, so we've done 2. We're going to do another 10 rows. Remember that every single shell is worked into the middle stitch of the shell from the row before. Every row has 20 shells in it. You join with a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3 to finish a row, and you start a row in the middle stitch of that shell. Chain 3 counts as a double crochet, and I'll see you at the end of another 10 rows of this shell stitch. I have now completed 12 rows of the little shell stitch. So that's row 13, or the 12th row of shell stitch. This little sack is now 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters tall and 5 inches or 13 centimeters wide. It's a nice little size. You could certainly hide all sorts of sweet little goodies in there. Candy, chocolates, maybe some small jewelry boxes, possibly some gift cards. But if you wanted to keep adding rows of the shell stitch to make your bag taller, you're more than welcome to. And of course you should have quite a lot of the yarn left over, so you could certainly keep going and make this bigger, I should say taller, if you've got a specific gift size in mind. What you want to do is get the size of the bag you want and then add 2 more rows of our little shell stitch pattern. So I will be adding 2 more rows of my shell stitch pattern because I want a little bit of the bag pattern to sit out the top of the bag once we have it all cinched together. And that's what's going to give it that old-fashioned little sack look. So once you've decided you like the size of your bag, you're going to work 2 more rows of the shell stitch pattern, and the 3rd shell stitch row from the top down will become your drawstring row. So we don't even have to make a special drawstring row. We're just going to use the little spaces in between our shells. So once you have a bag the size you like, add 2 more rows of the shell stitch row. I'm going to do that now, and I'll catch up with you. I've finished my last 2 rows of shell stitch, and these are the 2 rows that are going to sit out top of my little bag when it's all cinched together. So I marked the 3rd shell stitch row down with a little stitch marker so that I know that that is my drawstring row. I will be weaving my drawstring in between the spaces in between those little shells. So that's 3 rows down. Now all we want to do is just finish off the top edge of our sack with a sweet little edging. We're going to use a small open scallop. No matter how many rows you've worked in your little shell stitch pattern, when you join the last of your shell stitch rows with a slip stitch to the top of that chain 3, you're going to stay right there to begin the little open scallop. So you're not slip stitching into the middle stitch. Instead, you're going to chain 2, into the middle stitch of your little shell, you're going to double crochet. Chain 2, and into the top of the last stitch across that shell, you're going to slip stitch. So just slip stitch right into the top of that last stitch, and that happens across every little shell. So let's do that again. We're going to slip stitch into the first stitch of the shell, chain 2, double crochet into the top of the middle stitch, chain 2, and slip stitch into the top of the last stitch of that little shell. And there's our cute little rounded open scallop that goes across the top of each one of our shells. Let's do one more together. So there's the next shell. You slip stitch into the first stitch, chain 2, double crochet into the top of the middle stitch, chain 2, slip stitch into the top of the last stitch of the shell, and that completes the little open scallop. You're just going to repeat that little pattern across the top of each shell all the way around, and you'll have a sweet little open edging when you're done. Once you've worked that little open scallop all the way around, there should be a little one sort of sitting on the top of each one of your shells, so you should have 20 of these little open scallops. Make sure you slip stitch in the top of the last stitch of the last little shell, and you can just close off by slip stitching into the edge of that chain 3 or just underneath it. That'll just close off the row, and now you can snip your yarn. Fasten off, and you can take a moment with your yarn needle to weave your tail in, back and forth. You might want to sort of weave it down behind one of those double crochets and then weave them back and forth across that last row of shell. Now that our little sack is all done and we've marked our drawstring row, it's time to make a couple of drawstrings. Now we're going to make a couple of drawstrings that we're going to insert into our bag and finish after they're inserted. So they're going to start with a heart, they're going to end with a heart, but we're going to actually weave them through our drawstring row before we finish them. So cute little trick to keep your drawstrings from coming undone. We're going to begin with a slip knot. We're going to chain 2, and into that second chain from the hook, or the first chain you made, you're going to work 7 single crochet. We're working pretty small here, so once you've got 7 single crochet worked into that first chain you made, or the second chain from the hook, you're going to join with a slip stitch to that first single crochet. You could just ignore your short tail, you can work over top of it, you can put it to the back and sort of weave it in later. I'm just going to work over top of mine because I find it a little easier. But from this starting point, we're going to chain 2, and into that same stitch that we just joined and then chained 2 out of. So if you pull up on it, you can see that little space. You're going to work 5 double crochet into that same stitch. So 5 double crochet into the same stitch that you just chained 2 out of. So that's our start. Now, into these next 2 single crochets, you're going to work a half double crochet into each of them. So 1 half double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. Into the next stitch, which is going to be the very bottom point of our heart, we're going to work single crochet, chain 1, and into the same stitch, single crochet. So single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, all into the same stitch. You're going to half double crochet once in each of the next 2 stitches. So we're on the way up the other side of our little heart here. And that leaves us with 1 stitch left. You're going to work 5 double crochet into it. So 5 double crochet, chain 2, and slip stitch into the same stitch that you just double crocheted 5 times into. So you should have something that looks like this. So you can sort of peel out the 2 sides of your little heart. You're going to put your hook right through the center of that little heart now and grab the yarn on the other side and slip stitch. And now you're going to chain 75. All right, we should all have something that looks like this. So we've got a little heart here. You can pull out the little bottom. It's attached to a chain. You've chained 75, and now you want to cut yourself about 2 yards of yarn. So cut around 2 yards of yarn, because that's how we're going to finish our little heart. Make sure you've cut at least 2 yards, pull way up on that working loop, and put your hook aside. And now, you're going to take your little sack, flatten it so that your bottom is nice and flat, and you're going to find that row that you've marked. It's your 3rd shell row down from the top. You're going to pop over to the edge, find the first little hole, first little drawstring hole. You're going to take the end of your, so the working loop that you've pulled up on the end of your little string, and you're going to start weaving it through the spaces around either side. So over, under, around those shells in that row. You can take your marker out. Nice and easy. You want to do that all the way around. When you get back around to the other side, it's going to come out on the other side of the shell from where it went in originally. And you're going to very carefully pull out the working loop. So there's your working loop. And holding on to that working loop, you're going to just gently pull out that long tail you left behind. It's going to come all the way through the bag. There we go. So now we've got the finished heart on one side. So there's the drawstring with the finished heart on one side. And now we're going to finish the heart on the other side. So you're going to take your hook, put it back inside that working loop. And now, so you're back inside that working loop. You're going to find the second loop from the hook. So there's that little one there. I'm going to skip it. I'm going to go to the second one. And into that, I'm going to work 7 single crochet. 7 single crochet. You might find the first 3 are comfortable on one side of the chain, and you can sort of turn the whole thing, pass your yarn over, and work the other 4 single crochet into that little chain on the other side of your drawstring. There we go. So you'll have something that kind of sits out of the edge of your drawstring like that. What you want are 7 single crochet worked into the second chain from the hook. Make sure you've got 7. You're going to join with a slip stitch to the first one, and it might help to work on a surface because the weight of your bag might make it a little difficult for you. So if it helps, work down on your surface. And now we're going to do the row 2 of that first heart we made exactly the same way. So we're going to chain 2 to begin. And into that same stitch that we joined in, we're going to work 5 double crochet. So 5 double crochet. Into each of the next 2 stitches around that little circle, we're going to work a half double crochet. So 1 half double crochet into the next 2. Into the next stitch, so the bottom of our heart, we're going to work single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, all into the same stitch. Now we're coming up the other side of our little circle. You should have 3 stitches left. You're going to work a half double crochet into the next 2 stitches. So 1 half double crochet into each of those 2 stitches there. That leaves you with 1 stitch left. So you should have something that looks like this. Remember, it's easier to work on your table so the weight of your bag doesn't make it all sort of difficult for you to hold on to. You're going to work 5 double crochet into that last stitch. Chain 2, slip stitch into the same stitch that you had the 5 double crochet in. And now you're going to reach into the center of your heart. That sounds kind of cute. Reach into the center of your heart. Slip stitch through the middle of it, and then you can chain 1 across the top. So sort of chain 1 and just fasten off. You can pull your string right through it, make it nice and tight, and there's the little heart to finish. So obviously you won't need all that tail. You can trim it back. You just need enough that you can weave it in across the back of your heart so that it disappears. And there's a heart on both sides. And they will not come out, so you won't lose this little drawstring. Now you can just do 1 little drawstring like this, or you can do a second one and put it through going sort of, you start it on the opposite side of the one you started. So this one goes in here, you start your second one in here, go all the way around, and when you pull them taut, you can sort of end up pulling 2 out each side. So I'm going to go ahead and work a second one going the opposite direction, and I'll show you what that looks like. I just want to add, when you go to sort of weave in your little tail, you might want to thread up your yarn needle and just bring your yarn through a stitch on the chained little string, just so that your heart sits up with the sort of the little dippy part sort of attached to that string. That way it doesn't hang upside down or sort of hang strangely. So you just sort of run your yarn right through that chained length that you made, and then you can weave the tail in around the back of your little heart. Alright, so there's the first one we made. And then I made a second one to start. I started weaving it through the spaces on the opposite side of where I started this one. So it starts and comes out in the opposite side. And then when you grab both and you sort of cinch it together, you get this nice even bunching. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. And you can either use these as a single tie, you can sort of tie them once, and you have all these little hearts hanging off your little pouch. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. So you can do just one with sort of one drawstring with the 2 hearts, or 2 drawstrings, so you have 4 hearts, and tie it up any way you like. And there you go. A sweet, super fancy looking, highly detailed little reusable gift bag. Of course, you can use this to give gifts back and forth, much like some of the Victorians did, or whoever gets it can just keep famous little treasures in it, tucked away for whenever they want to sort of dip into a little bag and see something fancy. The idea behind this is that you're giving someone a piece of yourself. So like I said, the Victorians believed that the gift should be part of the giver. And ladies spent a lot of time making gifts, so highly embroidered things, maybe sewn pouches, lots of knitting, lots of crochet, and they would give these things to each other, to their girlfriends, especially along the younger crowd. They would also give them to like a favorite girl cousin that lived nearby. They might pass little gifts back and forth in the same little pouch. And if they were being courted or were newly engaged, they were allowed to give their fiancé a very practical gift, so nothing intimate. We're talking like, you know, shaving soap or maybe house slippers, something very, very practical that didn't suggest anything untoward. But they were perfectly allowed to wrap it up in a fancy little pouch. And of course, they could spend oodles of time embroidering these or working on fine little crochet, delicate patterns. And of course, without saying it or giving something risque, by giving a gift in something that you had spent a lot of time on, you were saying, I was thinking about you, or I was thinking about you, you know, very sweetly. And this was a way to sort of almost give a secret love note to your fiance without the old aunt in the background, like raising an eyebrow and getting all, like, you know, disgusted. So of course, these sorts of things, a lot of them still remain. The fancy little pouches that they made, there was so much work and delicate, you know, like stitchery and everything that went into them, that you might even still have a few lingering if you've got great-great-grandmothers that kept them or passed them down. They may be holding potpourri. They might be holding, you know, little things tucked away in somebody's underwear drawer because they might have been considered, you know, a little on the intimate side. These sweet little bags have a billion different uses, and the whole notion about stuff being reusable, especially gift wrapping, is not new. It's quite old, mainly because when you spent a lot of time on something, you wanted it to stay around and you wanted it to be shown off. So that is the inspiration behind today's little gift bag. I hope you guys enjoyed making it along with us, and I hope you enjoyed this little mini Victorian history lesson. That's it. We'll see you soon here on the Jayda and Stitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have a wonderful week. Bye, everybody.
Hi everybody, Mr. InStitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.